Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the latest business lobby group, the Institute of Directors in this case, pointing out that Brexit is still battering their ability to do business and as a result, seeing investment leak away from the UK towards the EU. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So let's go over the headline points first, and then I'll discuss the subtext, which the article, as usual, fails to mention. So an article reports that the Institute of Directors are saying that companies trading with Europe are still struggling with the added costs and the complexity of Brexit, and that more companies are choosing to withdraw. They polled their members and found 59% of those who trade with Europe are still having problems, which is the same, they say, as last year, indicating that the problems are not going away with increased familiarity. Now, that's an important point because the government initially tried to give the impression that problems with Brexit would be sorted out once businesses got to grips with the new system. It's like, you're just going to have a new system, you just need to learn how to use it, and there you'll be flying. As if we were like getting a new version of Windows, and you just had to get used to where everything is now. But we didn't change from one system to another. We changed from open trade to closed trade. Brexit's basically like I'm finding Windows 11. No benefits, a heap of things I can't do anymore, but I could with Windows 10. I wish I still had Windows 10. And these additional costs and complexities of Brexit are known to be, they particularly affect small businesses and manufacturers. Manufacturers because EU rules keep changing all the time. And if we're not mirroring those changes, and we're not mirroring those changes, then they have a harder time convincing their customers in the single market that their goods are meeting the standards. And when I say their customers, first of all, of course, they've got to convince the border guards in between. So then for manufacturers, it's not just that the problems of Brexit aren't getting any better. They are actively getting worse each year. But small businesses in general of any type are badly affected as well, because they're not large enough to just say, well, let's move some of our operation or indeed all of it from Britain to the EU. They're not large enough to hire a department, some staff specifically to deal with Brexit issues. And there are more people employed in this country by small businesses than large ones. Pursuing an economic policy which particularly harms small businesses is a really bad idea. They employ more people collectively, and they don't get out of paying their taxes on anything like the same level as a larger company. And one point not really considered enough is when we hear of British-based businesses or parts of British-based businesses relocating to the EU, it's not just that we're losing jobs for workers in this country or the loss of tax revenues from their wages and the company's profits. It's that we're being reminded that when a business has a choice, it's like, shall we stay in Britain or shall we move to the EU? When it's forced to make that choice, and it has that choice, it chooses the European single market. And consider that it is 2.5 years since we left the customs union single market. The Institute of Directors are saying that companies are increasingly choosing to withdraw from the British market. And this will be a reflection of the fact that business directors are seeing that the government are not actually improving things for them. See, at the time, they may have stuck around and gone, look, this is a right mess. We'll give the government time. We'll give them a chance to iron out as many difficulties as they can. They say they're going to improve things. Let's give them a shot. We can afford to go for a couple of years and let them see. But it's not happening. And one particular problem cited, and this is very much in line with what the Bank of England last year highlighted as the number one concern for businesses, was in hiring staff. The Institute of Directors says that businesses are struggling to cover skills shortages because of the new immigration rules. And consider that this actually means fewer jobs for British workers. See, those who supported Brexit for immigration reasons, they saw migrant workers as taking jobs. And you can sort of see the logic, but the reality is actually backwards. Migrant workers create jobs. See, consider the scenario as being described by the IOD here. So imagine a business employs 50 people, or it needs to employ 50 people, shall we say. Different types of jobs. Some of the jobs are very skilled and the business is unable to hire enough people to fill them domestically. They advertise and they advertise, they just cannot fill those roles, right? Now, in the past, their hiring process covered almost the entire continent. Now it's much harder to recruit foreign workers unless the pay is very high. Even then, the complexity of the visa process means fewer EU workers are interested when they can just go to Ireland and not have to deal with the bureaucracy. So let's say this business has got 45 of the 50 employees it needs. Sourced locally, sourced domestically, they've got 45 British workers, right? But it still needs those other 5. It's not like the production's slow without those 5. They have specific roles that the business absolutely needs, and they can't get them. They can't get the people with those skills, which means that the business model is shot. So what happens? Well, they moved to the Netherlands because they couldn't hire 5 EU workers with those skills, and they didn't have British workers with those skills taking those jobs up. So what happens? They move to the Netherlands, say, and 45 British workers lose their jobs because they couldn't hire those 5 EU workers. If they could have just hired those extra 5 workers, they'd be going strong, providing jobs to at least 45 British people. Now they need to find the people who've lost their jobs need to find one of a diminishing number of businesses to take them on, possibly for lower wages. And this is how, as counterintuitive as it might be for some to understand, foreign workers were not actually taking jobs. Yes, there was a particular issue with a rule that we had that allowed employers to pay foreign workers significantly below the going rate if they couldn't source workers locally. But that should have been stopped. Labour is saying that they would stop that if they win power. You could have just stopped that. That wasn't an EU rule. We did that. But in general, we hired foreign workers to meet our economic demands. We had more jobs going than people to fill them. Losing that ready supply of skilled EU workers, as well as sort of more seasonal workers for, say, hospitality and farming, it hasn't meant more jobs for British people. I mean, look at the situation. Businesses are struggling to hire workers. It's their number one issue. And they're struggling to the point where they're scaling back or closing down in Britain altogether. It's not even like workers can boast of higher salaries. There have been some good trade union wins in limited areas, but mostly both the private and especially public sector pay awards have been below the level of inflation. So people have actually been taking pay cuts since Brexit. This high wage economy was a Brexit lie. Workers are getting poorer, businesses can't recruit, and when that business scales or closes down, what British workers they were employing are now out of a job. There was a particularly telling quote in this article. It was from the chief executive of a firm reported to have had sales of nearly £7 million last year. He said, "What makes it harder is that there seems to be different requirements for every individual country." Now, this is the sort of thing I see reported time and time again. It highlights the fact that for years, business leaders trading around Europe didn't actually need to know how international trade works or even how the EU works. The EU was never this huge, bureaucratic, monolithic beast. It existed to make bureaucracy disappear from people's lives. This business leader, who manages a company that brings in £7 million worth of sales in a year, and like so many others, they got used to trade with over 24 countries in Europe, including all the largest consumer markets. They got used to it all being exactly the same. Export to or import from France, Belgium, Italy, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Spain, Poland, didn't matter. Process was the same. Now these business leaders are getting used to the idea that not only is that trade way more difficult, it's not even the same process. You can say, right, we need to export these to Germany. You find out the system, you work out the system. Oh, this is the paperwork. Right, okay. I know how to fill this in. That's fine. Next week, I need to send this to Belgium. Oh, okay, well, I know how to do the paperwork now. It's fine. What do you mean Belgium's different? What do you mean Belgium's a different country? Why has it got a different system? It's in the EU, isn't it? They expected that even with the trade friction of the extreme Tory Brexit, they would just need to learn how to deal with the paperwork for trading with the EU, and that would be it. Yes, more complex and expensive, okay, but one system. It's a system, isn't it? No, it's not. Despite what the Brexiteers keep saying, EU members are sovereign members. They all have their own independent systems for trading with third countries. The harmonious EU systems are for internal purposes. But he also said of Brexit, and I quote, "It was just a huge own goal and nothing, from an international trade perspective, has replaced what we've lost." No, indeed. That's the thing. It's not a case of losing business in Europe and gaining it elsewhere. It's just losing business in Europe. Brexit didn't give businesses the tools to develop rest of world trade. They could have done that just as easily beforehand. Some of them didn't because it was way more lucrative to trade with Europe. It's right next door, and it's got some of the wealthiest countries in the world. In fact, it was easier to trade abroad if we'd stayed in the EU, like the rest of the world, because every new trade deal the EU is signing, because they're still signing trade deals, is better than the ones we have acquired alone. The latest one, the New Zealand trade deal for the EU, way better terms for them than we got. In fact, we got no terms. We got to bend over and be spanked. There are businesses who are now trading more outside Europe than they did before, but that's not a boost to their business. It just means that the extreme Tory Brexit has so damaged our trade with Europe that actually it's sometimes easier to trade with a country at the other side of the world than it is right next door. But it costs a lot more to do it, so their profits are lower. They've not boosted their business. They're taking lower profits, which means we get lower tax revenues. And the name of the game in any business is making money. And the only purpose in us cheering boosted business is for the tax revenues and the jobs it provides. If it's not providing them, then it's no benefit to us that a business may be, making more sales. If those sales are less valuable, what good does that do us? So we're going to continue to see more British-based business shifting overseas. And the thing about that is, once it's gone, it's gone. Like, even if we rejoined the EU and we smashed all those trade barriers down, like it was the Berlin Wall, which it sort of is, we'd still not get that business back because once it's moved, it's moved. It costs money to relocate. Rejoining won't make it easier to be located in Britain, just the same. We'd be stopping the continuing exodus of investment in Britain to other countries, so we'd put a halt to it, but we won't reverse it. We'd have to start again, just like we did in the 1970s, building it back up. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.